In the normal upper GI tract, food enters the esophagus from the mouth and moves towards the stomach through peristaltic muscle action as well as gravity. When the food reaches the junction of the esophagus and the stomach, the lower esophageal sphincter relaxes to allow the passage of food into the stomach. The sphincter then contracts and maintains the closure between esophagus and stomach. Food in the stomach then stimulates acid and enzyme production. The partially digested food, called chyme, is formed and then passes from the stomach into the first portion of the duodenum. When food enters the stomach, acid is produced, and enzymes such as pepsin are released to digest the food. In the normal stomach, the lower esophageal sphincter remains constricted and prevents acid and digestive enzymes from ascending the esophagus. In some individuals, there is transient relaxation of the sphincter that allows stomach contents to enter reflux into the esophagus. Factors that promote reflux into the esophagus are recumbency, a large gastric volume, fatty foods, smoking, and drugs that reduce the lower esophageal sphincter tone, such as anticholinergics, caffeine, and alcohol. Sitting upright or even raising the head of the bed when sleeping can inhibit reflux into the esophagus by allowing gravity to move stomach contents in the right direction. Some individuals have an anatomic abnormality where a portion of the stomach protrudes through the diaphragm into the chest, called a hiatus hernia. Whatever the underlying mechanism, reflux of gastric acid, digestive enzymes, and bile into the esophagus will result acutely in GERD symptoms. These substances initially cause inflammation of the superficial layers of esophageal tissue, or esophagitis. When reflux and inflammation happens repeatedly, chronic inflammation, it can lead to the complications of GERD. One complication of chronic inflammation is erosion of esophageal epithelium into submucosal and muscular layers forming ulcers. This can be accompanied by bleeding and is called erosive esophagitis. In some individuals, chronic inflammation leads to the formation of fibrous scar tissue in place of normal tissue. As the scar forms, it can contract and form a stricture, narrowing the lumen of the esophagus. Also, with chronic inflammation of the esophagus, the reparative process may lead abnormally to the replacement of the squamous epithelial lining of the esophagus by specialized columnar-type epithelium, which is called Barrett's esophagus. This condition increases the risk of strictures and esophageal adenocarcinoma. While gastric acid is not the underlying cause of GERD, it is responsible for symptoms and damage when it is present in the esophagus. Acid is produced by parietal cells, specialized epithelial cells, which line the inner portion of the stomach. Secretion of gastric acid, HCl, can be stimulated by three separate pathways: histamine 2 receptor, acetylcholine, gastrin. Carbon dioxide, CO2, diffuses into the parietal cell from the bloodstream and then combines with H2O via carbonic anhydrase to form carbonic acid, H2CO3. Carbonic acid dissociates into hydrogen ion, hydrogen and bicarbonate, HCO3-. From the bloodstream, the bicarbonate molecule is exchanged for chloride ion, Cl-. The hydrogen ion is actively transported into gastric lumen in exchange for a potassium ion, K+, via a specialized protein called ATPase, hydrogen potassium adenosine triphosphate. Chloride freely diffuses from the parietal cell cytoplasm into the gastric lumen. Finally, the hydrogen ion and the chloride ion combine in the gastric lumen to form hydrochloric acid, which is gastric acid. Approaches to treatment of GERD include inhibition of gastric acid production or neutralization, as well as mechanical measures to reduce gastric fluid reflux into the esophagus. Gastric acid production can be inhibited by histamine 2 receptor antagonists or by proton pump inhibitors. Histamine 2 receptor antagonists, such as ranitidine, bind to the histamine receptor of the surface of the gastric parietal cell and reduce acid production that would normally be stimulated by histamine. Proton pump inhibitors such as omeprazole, work within the cell by irreversibly binding to hydrogen potassium ATPase and shutting off acid production. Additionally, some people may use liquid of tablet antacids to neutralize gastric acid as supplements to histamine 2 receptor antagonists or proton pump inhibitors, or alone to treat mild GERD. For the best outcome, medication treatment should be combined with lifestyle modifications that include avoiding troublesome foods, stopping smoking, avoiding medications that reduce lower esophageal sphincter tone whenever possible, and avoiding recumbency after eating.